I think a lot of One Piece fans still don't really understand the series. Or maybe they simply don't want to understand it. So I want to talk about something that's been getting a lot of attention lately. Spoiler warning, because I'm going to reveal some story details. So, according to the latest spoilers, apparently Luffy recovers by eating food and gets his energy back so he can return and fight Emu. A lot of people were shocked and were like, what? Luffy healed himself just by eating? Yeah, exactly. That's One Piece. Luffy eats, gets his energy back, and is ready to fight again. So honestly, what's so crazy about that? Look, One Piece was never meant to be a completely serious and realistic series. A huge part of its charm comes from the comedy and ridiculous moments. Of course, there are incredibly serious and emotional moments too, but comedy has always been part of the series. In that sense, One Piece has a lot in common with Dragon Ball, and Oda was definitely influenced by Akira Toriyama's work. A lot of things might look ridiculous from the outside, but that's exactly what makes them part of One Piece's identity. Just look at Gear 5. Gear 5 itself is full of funny moments. Luffy moves around during fights more like a cartoon character than a traditional serious fighter. But that's one of the main things that makes One Piece what it is. I honestly don't have a problem with that. I think the problem starts when some fans expect One Piece to be exactly what they want it to be. You want fan service, not a story. But the story belongs to Oda. It's not your story. One Piece doesn't belong to you. You follow the series, enjoy it, come up with theories, criticize it, and discuss it. But at the end of the day, you're not the one deciding how the story should go. Oda is the one writing the story, so naturally, he's the one who decides what happens. And of course, I don't consider myself the biggest One Piece fan in the world. I've taken a few breaks over the years, but I always came back and continued reading. And I'm still caught up with the story. But am I going to claim that I'm the biggest One Piece fan? No. Still, from a somewhat outside perspective, I find it pretty ridiculous how worked up some people get over things like this. Because from what I see, some fans want One Piece to become solo leveling, where everything revolves around power, fighting, and comparing who's stronger than who. But if One Piece were only meant to be a series about power scaling and showing off strength, that would honestly be a shame. That's not what One Piece is. That's why I think a lot of power scaling discussions don't really fit the nature of One Piece. When you start trying to find strict logic and precise rules behind every single thing that happens, sometimes you end up forgetting what the story is actually about. At the end of the day, what some fans want is basically their own version of One Piece, not necessarily what the author intended to create. I'll say it again. The author is the one who decides what happens in his own story. You don't get to decide how the story should go. And honestly, that mindset from some fans really drives me crazy. You're following the story, and of course, you have every right to dislike something. If you're unhappy with a certain decision, you absolutely have the right to criticize it. But deep down, you also know you're going to keep reading. You say, I'm done with One Piece, and then next week, you're back to see what happens. No matter what you say, you're going to keep following it. You know that yourself. And I'm saying this as someone who doesn't claim to be the biggest One Piece fan in the world. I love One Piece, but that's it. It's not my entire life.